the aim of providing ideal platforms to discuss innovations in education, enrich teaching and learning, building capacities for effective school and office management, and share top education resources. The National DepEd ICT Summit features timely and relevant topics presented by experts in the fields of ICT and education. Dr. Miguel Q. Rapatan earned his master's and doctorate in education, major in communication, computing and technology in education from Teachers College, Columbia University, New York, on a Fulbright grant. He was director of Assist in De La Salle University, Manila, training university faculty on how to integrate technology in their coursework and classroom teaching. As associate professor, Dr. Rapatan also teaches at the Department of Communication in De La Salle University, Manila, where he handles graduate courses in the department's MA in Applied Media Studies and the PhD Executive Management programs of the College of Education. He has worked as editor, writer, producer-director for a number of documentary and educational videos, and programs and interface designer for interactive multimedia programs and web-based courses. Among the programs he has designed are online courses for the ASEAN University Network and the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change in Bonn, Germany, and an interactive adventure game called ASEAN Quest for the ASEAN Foundation in Jakarta, Indonesia. He is currently a member of the Teacher Training and Instruction Program of the Commission on Higher Education. He is also a member and past two-term chairperson of the Manunuri ng Pelikulang Pilipino. To discuss integrating technology with classroom teaching in the Philippine context, let us all welcome Dr. Miguel Rapatan.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Good to hear your voice. Before I begin, I'd just like to express my thanks to the organizing committee for inviting me to speak to you at this very important summit. It's always a good thing for all of us to gather to talk about a very important, relevant topic. As educators, we are all aware that our job is to prepare our students for the 21st century workplace. And there's a lot of agreement among educators that in order for students to be equipped for the 21st century workplace, they have to acquire the 7 C's of 21st century learning, namely critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, cross-cultural understanding, computing, and career and lifelong learning. Of particular interest to us is, of course, computing. And we know that over the past years, ICT has proliferated with so many kinds of applications that it has affected the way we live and work. So in the past century, it was probably enough to just work with charts, sheets, and a laptop. But nowadays, we have more applications to contend with. So the question that we ask ourselves is, in terms of the K-12 curriculum program, how do we integrate technology in teaching and learning in a way that enables our students to develop 21st century skills and become globally competitive? So what I'm going to share would be about 7 key ideas that may help us. And a lot of these ideas that I'm sharing are based on research as well as my own personal involvement with different schools, particularly also with some divisions in the public school system. And it's good to know that there is really widespread interest in making sure that ICT in the curriculum actually happens. So the first thing I'd like to share is, let's take it from the expert, Stephen Covey. Where do we begin? And he always says, begin with the end in mind. So in the light of the K to 12, what is the end in mind? The end in mind is produce students who are globally competitive. This is what IRRR says regarding the K to 12 program. But what does it mean to be globally competitive? Does it mean that we should prepare students to be able to work abroad? Well, if we go by that reasoning, we know that there are people who go abroad but are not necessarily competitive or competent. So we need to rethink this idea of global competitiveness. And the way I would think about it is global competitiveness is about being excellent. Globally, competitiveness is excellence anywhere and anytime. To be the best version of yourself so that you are ready to work anywhere at any time. And in the light of the 21st century, excellence would mean being excellent in the 21st century skills. Excellence in communication, excellence in critical thinking, excellence in cross-cultural understanding, in computing, collaboration, and very important, creativity. So if this is the end in mind that we have to think of, whether we're in the classroom or we're working as ICT coordinators, this is the overarching goal that we have to achieve. Hence, when we talk about ICT integration, it's not only about developing the skill of computing. As various research has shown, we need to look at computing in relation to the other skills. So one very important thing we have to keep in mind is that in terms of developing excellence anywhere, anytime, we have to make sure that we're teaching all of it together. We connect all the skills, we don't isolate one from the other. So when we do ICT integration, we teach that in relation to critical thinking, in relation to communication, in relation especially to creativity, because the 21st century world is looking for new answers to emerging problems. So in order to develop this global competitiveness and excellence, another thing to keep in mind is that we should aim to transform, not just merely inform. So what are we going to transform? We're going to transform the teaching, learning process. And according to research, what would that involve? The first one is, in the traditional type of school, the emphasis is usually on covering the content. And the teacher asks, what topics will I discuss today? But with ICT integration, as well as the development of global competitiveness, we move from that to a classroom where students are doing problem solving. And the teacher asks the question, what challenge will my students tackle today? So right from the beginning, students are already presented with a problem. And that problem, if put in an engaging way, will lead the students to acquire and develop the competencies. Secondly, if content is so much emphasized, what happens to students? They become passive receivers of information. And in that light, teachers tend to ask the question, today, what will my students recite? Of course, that's not going to lead to global competitiveness if children are going to be passive in the classroom. So we need to think about enabling the students to be active producers of knowledge with ICT tools. And this is what a lot of people are talking about these ways, that we do have the tools today to make it possible for students to be agents of their own learning. So we ask the question, what will my students make by the end of the learning unit? Instead of asking, what is it that my students will be able to give back? We want students to transform the information into new knowledge. Related to that idea of passive receivers, in the traditional classroom, there's usually the stereotypical arrangement of the classroom in terms of rows. People are calling this the cemetery effect, wherein students are placed in rows that are rigidly placed, and the teacher will often say, hands on the desk, feet flat on the floor. So the question that often comes up is, how will my students sit? But if our students are going to be engaged in making and producing new knowledge, the classroom situation is going to change. The physical setup is going to be different. In fact, teachers will now be thinking of flexible learning spaces for group work. And the teacher is going to be asking, how will my students interact? In terms of assessment, what usually happens if you emphasize too much on content, then you end up assessing students regarding their ability to recall content. You ask the question, how much content can my students recall? But when students are now engaged in producing and creating artifacts of their learning, then the assessment changes, because now the focus of assessment is assessing for transfer. We ask ourselves the question, how will students transfer their learning to daily life? And this is where we make real-world connections between what students learn in the classroom with what goes on in their community. So research is telling us ICT integration is effective when we have problem solving, when students are active producers of knowledge, when the classroom is flexible to allow for a lot of group interaction, collaboration, and when the focus of assessment is for transfer. And the reason why we really need to think about this is because our students are already stepping into a world that we are now calling the digital society. The digital society, because of all the things that are happening, we are so much connected. We have this concept called the Internet of Everything, wherein devices, gadgets, software, systems now talk with each other. And so now people can communicate at faster rates, and people can also be able to produce something with the aid. So now, for example, if you need a car, you just go to Uber. If you need to transport, send some things to another place, there's an app called Mover already. So these are just examples of how this immersion in the Internet of Things is already affecting the way we are working and living. So this idea of transformation is actually something which has already been presented, I believe, in a previous conference. I saw this presented by Dr. Joyce Andaya. This is the DepEd framework for integration of ICT in teaching and learning. And it's a very good framework to use. I use it myself when I'm doing training with teachers, because one of the things that strikes me about the framework is that it emphasizes the development of transformation, of a transformative learning environment. Now, if we look at that, let's just take a closer look. So we laid out what research says are important principles for transformation. But how do we actually do it? What are the nuts and bolts of the process? So let's take a simple topic like marketing. Following the principles that we have set, beginning with the end in mind, we start with a question: what real-world challenge will my students tackle today? So what are the problems that happen, for example, in marketing in the real world? The second question is, what concepts will students need to know and understand to solve the challenge? So if that is the goal in order to solve a problem, what are the facts that I need to know, the definitions related to marketing, and what are the principles, or what they call like the 4 Ps that we need to remember about marketing? And following the challenge, the concepts, only then do we go to the computing tools. We ask the question, what tools will students use to find and produce the solution to the challenge? So with the ICT tool, they can search for the knowledge related to that. They can view examples. They can communicate with experts over distances. They don't have to necessarily talk to the person face to face. They can do a Skype. They can contact. They can email the experts. And then they can also come up with their own marketing plan. So in this process, what we're trying to show here is that ICT integration, for it to be effective, has to be curriculum-based. It is not about rolling out equipment as fast as we can. Because I have seen a lot of examples where schools, so dazzled by the technology, in their rush to claim that they are 21st century, they just simply ask parents and children to buy the gadgets, and they think that's already ICT. But you can have all those gadgets, and still the question remains, what are students and teachers going to do with that? So in this process, we need to make ICT at the service of the curriculum. So in that case, when we've dealt with the questions, then we can imagine or visualize or end up a classroom situation like this, where students are collaborating, sharing ideas, accessing information, and in that process, you see the students at the center of the teaching learning process. The teacher now just moves to the side, the guide on the side, giving feedback to what the students are doing. So in this case, we can see ICT enabling transformation. There's transformative learning with ICT. If you take a closer look at the process, starting with the question of challenge, this is actually in the K-12 curriculum referring to the performance standard. And we look at the question of what concepts, that's actually referring to the content standard. So one of the things that can help teachers is you don't have to really start for a challenge that's just off the top of your heads. We need to examine what are the performance standards and how are we going to help students achieve the performance standards. So the third thing that we need to think about is that when we're doing ICT integration, we design with the standards and contextualize. One of the things that I notice a lot with many schools is that when teachers do IC integration, they forget the K-12 standards and curriculum. They're just more after training the students how to operate the application or test, experiment the functions of a program. So in the process, at the end of the day, they learn the program, but they do not learn the standards. So one of the things that we need to have teachers do is to look at the standards and find out how to localize, contextualize the standards. So we know that in K to 12 program, there are two standards. The content standard answers the question, what will students learn? The performance standard answers the question, how will they use? The usual thinking about working with the standards is you start with the content and then you go to the performance standard. But you can also do it the other way. You start first with the performance standard, beginning with the end in mind, and then you go to the content standard. Because the content standard is just going to equip students with the concepts that will enable them to do the problem solving. So in this process, we are reversing the way that we're thinking about this. And when teachers see this kind of process, they get to understand that their goal is not the coverage of the content, but really developing students' creativity. So as Tony Wagner would say, the world doesn't care what you know. What the world cares about is what you do with what you know. And that's the experience of many of us, especially millennials now who are applying for jobs. There's hardly an interviewer who will ask the candidate, the applicant, a multiple choice question. Nobody in the interview asks what's a multiple choice question. They always ask, what have you done? Do you have a portfolio? Given this kind of topic, what will you do? And so this is the idea behind really sharpening our focus on performance. So if we now begin with the performance standard followed by the content standard, what next do we do? Then the next thing to do is to what we call unpack the standards. And unpacking means really finding out what the standards are asking us to do. So those who train teachers on unpacking, one of the things that they realize is this: as teachers unpack the component knowledge and skill required by a standard statement, they know, they better understand the learning expectations and can more clearly articulate those expectations to students and parents. One of the things I notice about teachers when I ask them to read the standards is that it takes them time to really understand what's going on. They're words written on a page. But later on, when you ask them questions about the standard, only then do they realize what is it that they're supposed to do. So one way to unpack the standards is to have them think about what are the standards saying in terms of what students need to know? What do students need to understand? What do students need to do? We refer to this as the KUDs. The knowledge part to know deals with facts, vocabulary definitions. Understand deals with principles, generalizations, and the do part deals with the performance or the creation of our particular product. So in this case, we look at the do part in the performance standard, and in the content standard, we try to figure out what's the know part and what's the understand part. So let's take just a very quick example from grade 7, science curriculum. The standard in the curriculum guide says, the learner should be able to conduct a collaborative action to preserve the ecosystem in the locality. So what are students supposed to do by the end of the learning unit? Conduct a collaborative action. So if that's going to be the goal, how will we prepare the students to do that collaborative action? So what will be the content that they will need to know and understand? So the content standard says, the learners demonstrate an understanding of organisms. So you need to have the definitions regarding that. Interacting with each other and with their environment to survive. So you need to understand principles of interaction. So once we figure out the know, the understand, and the do, then that's the time now that we think of the ICT tool that serves the standards. And this is what I always try to communicate to teachers. Our approach to ICT integration must be standards-based. One of the persons who helps us think about how to match the ICT tools with the content is Dr. Ruben Puentedura, who came up with the SAMR model. So S stands for substitution, A for augmentation, M for modification, and R for redefinition. And when you get to show this to teachers, they get to understand that not all websites, not all softwares are equal. They all have different purposes. So it would be good to understand what these different purposes are. So the first level, substitution, is when you're just merely using the website as an extension of a book. In other words, you just have the students read it, answer the question. The answers are already found in the website, so there's really nothing new to do. So in that case, how is technology being used? It's being used to pour content into the student's head. Technology is used for transmitting content. But if we look at the way technology was designed, technology was never invented as an extension of the chalkboard or textbook. Technology does something more. And that's why when teachers, for example, do an initial ICT integration, they tend to be in the mode of substitution. They tend to ask the students content that's already in a book. So if the aim of the question is for students to repeat the content, and it is already found in a book or a handout, there's no need really to use the computer because the book already will do that. So we need to think about what the technology can do, which the book cannot do. So that brings us now to the second level, which is called augmentation. Information in a book is static. It's fixed on a page. But in augmentation, information moves, like in a video or in an animation. So if we go back to that learning unit on the preservation of endangered species, we could show students a video, and our purpose is not just merely to transmit content, but to show that that content exists in the real world. It is not something theoretical. So I would choose a video where I would show the different kinds of organisms and how they're interacting with the environment. So in the classroom, we could be showing this video, and together with that video, asking the students to process the information. Students should not be merely viewing the video. That will again make them passive. They need to be active. So we can provide a worksheet with a graphic organizer like a Freyr's diagram and ask the students to think about the information from the video and put their ideas into the worksheet. Now, sometimes I always get that question when I start telling teachers, no, show video clips, no? And now they're starting to think, well, I don't have internet connectivity in my school. But now we know that we have software. The ICT people know that here, the tech coordinators, where we can freely download the videos. Like, for example, KeepVid. And when we download the video, we can keep the file, and we can play the file offline. We don't need to be connected. So in some of the divisions that I've worked with, this is what teachers do. In their free time, in their spare time, they download the video in advance, And then because it's now a file, a standalone file, they're now able to use it for classroom teaching. What about assessment? Another thing that's very important now is that students need to know if they got the correct answer. So at the level of augmentation, we can also think of software that will help students find out if their ideas are correct. So we have a lot of formative assessment type of software like Kahoot. And the one that's now very popular among teachers is ZipGrade. ZipGrade is you ask the students, for example, you're giving a multiple choice type of test. You have them answer the sheets, darken the circles. So it's like preparing them for a standardized test. But the wonderful thing about ZipGrade is the teacher can use his or her cell phone, scan over the sheet, and at once check it. So instead of spending so much time to check it, they simply scan, and the program reports the score of the student and also does item analysis. So it saves us a lot of time, helps us to think on the more important things. Another particular tool to do assessment with video is Edpuzzle. I think some of you have already tried this. And the nice thing about Edpuzzle is you can work with any YouTube video clip and create a test out of it. So in this example, you see here at the bottom, you have the green marks. Those are the pause points. The video will just automatically stop and ask the students to answer a question. And then after they answer the question and they input, the video continues. So in that way, the students are able to process the information as well as see real-life examples. So you can create multiple choice types of tests, selected response types of tests, as well as constructed response types of tests, open-ended questions. How about for the level of understand? So what does Puentedura say? What would be the appropriate type of a website? So he calls this the modification type. For example, you have the food chain game, which is highly interactive. The students get to play with this. They have to, for example, sequence different kinds of interactions among organisms. And at the end, after combining different types of food chains, they get feedback. And one of the things that we're often told about feedback is that feedback improves learning. Again, this is interactive. And a number of teachers ask me, so can we do this even without internet connectivity? And the solution that I have often seen ICT coordinators do is they work with flash files. So we can download the flash file and save it, and then we can have the connectivity and do the simulation. Let me see if I can do that here. So here's the game. And the idea is to put in the box the correct sequence. So what do you think is next? This one. If I put this, I get the feedback that it won't work. So this one happens, and then this one. So now I get a picture of the food chain. Now, am I working out of the internet? I am not connected. I'm not connected at all. Let me see here. Is this the control? Okay. If I was connected, you would see the message that there's a update. So in one division that I worked with, the ICT coordinators spent a lot of time downloading the flash files. And what they did was they distributed the flash files to the different subjects. So the schools in the remote areas where there are no towers at all to facilitate the connectivity, the children got to experience this game, these simulations. There's another application that you probably heard, and it's called Raspberry Pi that works with the server Racial Pi. And it facilitates offline interactivity. So again, schools in remote areas where connectivity is practically impossible, there's a device, the one you see there on the upper left, and what it does is that it downloads materials from different content providers and then stores it there. And then the next day, the teachers are able to access the content without having to worry about buffering or slow downloading. The interesting thing about this system is that it even automatically updates the content. So the teachers don't have to worry about the content being stale. And those are the different kinds of content there that you have being downloaded by this particular device. So the thing I just like to share is that the barriers to connectivity have come down. It's just a matter of our own initiative in trying to make sure that we can access this. On one side, you can access the flash files. On the other side, you can also try to acquire this system. The last level that Mentiduro talks about is redefinition, and that pertains to what students need to be able to do. So, for example, websites where students are asked to design, put together something like this website. They design a panda habitat, and they pick on the different elements in the menu, and they try to put it together in a way that will make the pandas come out. So if they correctly design the environment, they will see the pandas coming out from the cave. And in order to help them, they have resource people that they can refer to in order to be able to do the problem solving we're talking about. So at the level redefinition, there are many apps that children can use to do their performance tasks. And these are what we call the Web 2.0 apps. But when we have students do the performance tasks, we need to have them think about how can their learning be useful to the community? How can they think globally and act locally so that the information and knowledge they produce will be of benefit? For example, making a brochure, a poster, which the different community agencies can use in their particular work. So here's an example of integrating a Web 2.0 app with a performance task where we ask students to think globally and act locally. We start with a problem question. How do we protect these endangered species? Then the teacher could say, if the World Wildlife Fund were to recruit you as their ambassador, how would you advocate for the protection of endangered species? So in groups of 3, select 3 animals and report on the following. Why animal is endangered, how to protect the animal. So this is about thinking and acting locally. So together with that, we're developing the students' critical thinking, communication skills, collaboration skills. Then we can ask, make a multimedia campaign in a blog to protect your endangered animal. Include in your campaign important measures in varied forms. So that's where we now bring in computing, ICT, as well as creativity in addition to the other skills. So when we ask them to make a blog that's using Web 2.0, we can also now have them think globally. And we can ask the students in the performance task, reach out to and network with ASEAN's different groups and organizations with a hashtag account. Make them share with you how young people can get involved in your campaign. So there we bring in the skill of cross-cultural understanding. And through that, the technology that would be appropriate would be using social media. And then finally, we could say, at the end of your campaign, show in a blog how youth can have a lifelong involvement with the advocacy of protecting endangered species. So that now connects with the C of career, lifelong learning. All these things that we were talking about, the first 6, we usually think of that as simply the teacher's work. But research also showed that for effective ICT integration to take place, it's not only the teacher's work. We need to collaborate to integrate. So teachers need the help, partnership with others, the ICT coordinator, and very important persons, the administrator. It's the collaboration of these 3 that will ensure that there's going to be effective ICT integration. So let me just talk a little bit towards the end of just a simple case that is happening in the City Schools Division of Batac, Ilocos Norte, where at one time, SDS Vilma Eda was the superintendent. She's now the Provincial Schools Superintendent of Ilocos Norte, and now Batac is under SDS Dr. Joan Corpus. And at the time that I was engaged with them, it was a challenge from the beginning for them to collaborate. But because of a technology plan, we had them think about what is it about student learning that we need to happen, what should teacher training develop, what should school administrators engage in, and what type of ICT infrastructure do we need that is responsive to the needs of the curriculum. So from that, which was developed in 2014, they've gone a long way in providing offline interactivity. So you see there offline quizzes being done by the teachers, students doing simulations, and teachers doing class discussions in all kinds of learning spaces. Students are required to do their performance task, integrating apps, and the apps are things that they're also learned, integrating them using Web 2.0 tools. And what about the competencies of the students? They have tracked this and they've seen increases across the years in the students' subject competency levels. Teacher training is very extensive. Teacher training is done every weekend. The teachers voluntarily go to attend. There is scheduled training, and there are also LAC sessions that are connected with ICT. And in those LAC training, teachers are encouraged to develop, design interactive, localized learning materials. They've also put up an e-learning portal for teachers to access. In terms of administrative work, the division administrators, principals are engaged with stakeholders. And for me, this is a very important component to making ICT integration work. Because the teachers see that the administrators ensure that the environment, the infrastructure is provided. So they are creative about engaging the community to get involved. They do walk for a cause, Christmas tree type of fundraising, and they also have dinner for a cause. They engage with the local government. They have kapihan with the local media. They also contact their alumni, and the alumni who see the program at work get to donate equipment that are needed. So one of the things that has come out from their experience is the gadgets funded under MOOE and school-to-school partnerships were bought based on the immediate needs of the schools. So a lot of the things they're using goes beyond the DICP package because the things that they acquire are the things that they need that are responsive to their curriculum. They've even gone into acquiring now other 21st century technologies. They're bringing in Kibo robotics into the early grades and using virtual reality boxes to teach with augmented reality. All that happening within a span of 3 years and continuing to grow. So what we're just showing here is that when the community comes together, students, teachers, leaders, community stakeholders, there will be a bayanihan spirit to bring ICT integration in the classroom. So this is the experience of the City Schools Division of Batak. Because of the community coming together, you have students learning how to do problem solving. You have teachers more empowered to design ICT integrated learning materials. You have leaders doing community activities, advocacies that will enable them to acquire the needs that teachers need for the classroom. And there's also the development of a functional infrastructure, infrastructure that is dynamic and that continuously updates itself. So with this picture of Bayanihan, you have a transformative ICT-enabled learning environment. It's not only the students who are transformed, the teachers are transformed, the leaders are transformed, the community is transformed, the whole thinking about education is transformed. And as a result of that, the division is able to develop globally competitive, ready learners. So here's a thought from John Dewey. We must prepare our children not for the world of the past, not for our world, those of us who are digital migrants, but for their world, the digital natives, the world of the future. So for a long time, our schools, at some point, we were doing the BEC. We are teaching memorization of competencies. We were emphasizing a lot of the competencies, 100, 150 competencies sometimes for students to master and memorize. So we were very backward. What we need to think about with K-12 is from being backward, we can be techward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miguel Rapatan. We now open the floor to any questions to be addressed to our speaker. There are microphones around the venue, or someone will approach you to give you a microphone. So once again, the floor is now open to any questions to be addressed to our speaker. There are microphones around the venue, or someone will approach you to give you a microphone. To our dear speaker, we have some questions here. And first, in public school setting, where the computer to student ratio is 1 to 50, how can teachers reach the higher level of ICT integration when resources are limited and real integration requires longer time to perform?
So, oh, that was loud. Okay, so let me just reference that with what I've seen happen in Batak and what's currently going on in Ilocos Norte, the provincial schools. And when I asked the Division of Batak to put together an evaluation of their experience for the past 3 years, evaluation of the technology plan, one of the things that they pointed out was the ratio of students to computers. And because of their collective effort, what happened is that all schools, even in the remote areas, were equipped with projectors. The fundraising is focused on providing for laptops, in addition to what the DICP packages were doing, until they reached a point where the ratio was 1:35 instead of 1:50. Of course, over the years, because of maintenance, active use, some units were, had to be repaired. But that just goes to show that class size is not a barrier to the effort to initiate solutions to that problem. And it did not happen overnight. The ratios were targeted over 3 years. So because of a consistent program, they were able to bring down the number. And they still continue to work because they know 1:35 is really, it's good at that level, but it can still be better. Okay? So, aside from the things that are being delivered by the central office, we also need at the ground level, at the division level, to think of how are we going to engage the community, because the community is a very rich resource in order to address ratio issues. And I think that kind of initiative is something that has to be consistently communicated, because one of the things that I noticed in the experience of Batak, why they were able to get the community involved is because communication was consistent. There were monthly meetings with the local media, so they utilized the local media to communicate the direction of learning that the division wanted to do. They had the walk for a cause, dinner for a cause, regularly scheduled. You can ask the same question later on this afternoon to Superintendent Vilma Eda. She's going to be on the panel, and I think she can give you more details on that. So what this is just showing to us is that, the problems will always be there, but it's our vision that's going to move us to seek solutions. Do you have another question?
Hello, Sir Mike.
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't really see because the light is so bright. Anyway,
Okay, sir. I have a question. I am interested in the Raspberry Pi thing that you have presented a while ago. Because most of my schools in my division are not covered or not within the range of telcos. So what is in that, as far as I know, that Pi is just a small device, act like a small computer. And what is in that device, embedded in that device to enable it's like an offline internet
right,
connection.
right. So it's actually something that you plug, and then uh, the way I'm not an engineer, okay? So the way I understand it working in Batak is that whatever they order, it comes in a kit that has to be assembled. So what the division does is that they have some kind of a MOU with Mariano Marcos State University, and they ask the computer engineers in that university to assemble the kit for them. So they would really know the components, no, of the kit. How come it's able to do what it actually does? So probably later on, no, if Superintendent Edda is here, she can refer you to those people who are knowledgeable about this. The main thing that I'm just concerned about is that to just make it clear to the teachers, no, that offline connectivity, offline interactivity is something that can actually happen. That particular solution was something that we stumbled on by accident. No? I did not know that it has been already operational in other countries, but it was a good discovery. And because of that, again, the teachers now have access. No? They're not too worried too much about having online connectivity. So maybe just to follow up on that, if your division is interested to explore that, then you could also find out who you can partner with in the community in order for you to be able to have those kits assembled so that they become very functional. So again, no, it's going back to the idea of community partnership, being able to tap the people in the community to be able to make your ICT integration happen. And that needs to come out in your tech integration plan. It's not simply the number of equipment to acquire. It's also the partnerships that we can engage with. Also, another thing, in relation to procurement of applications. And this is again from the experience of another ICT coordinator in Ilocos Norte. ZipGrade, if some of you have already tested it, no? This ICT coordinator was very interested in ZipGrade. Now, if you're going to use ZipGrade, there's an annual fee. Now, that did not deter, that did not discourage the ICT coordinator, because what he did was he searched for the inventor of the app and then told him, I am an ICT coordinator helping schools here in the Philippines, here in Ilocos Norte. I very much like the app you did, but I do not have the funds in order to pay for the annual fee. And is there a way that I can use your app? And the inventor wrote back and just asked for some verification that he was a teacher, that he was teaching in some schools. And upon receiving the verification, the inventor told him, I'm giving it to you for free. The only thing I'm going to ask you to do is to be a beta tester. So as I'm developing this, you have full access to it. And because of that, he is able to do zip grade in his own division. So again, that's thinking out of the box, no? Capitalizing on your status, on your condition, and just being open with people. Because as we know, part of ICT culture is to share. And a lot of people who are developing new applications want their applications tested in many ways, in many countries. So we should not feel inhibited. We should, just take the next step in explaining to the people concerned, this is my situation, these are my resources. Is there a way that, we can have a partnership? And I think when we focus on the word partnership, it becomes something more productive for both parties, not just one side benefiting.
Check. Good morning to all of us. This is Engineer Kawili of Region 12, DepEd Kadipawan City Division. I just would like to share something regarding Raspberry Pi, because this is very interested about Raspberry Pi. I just would like to invite, if you are interested about it, the booth in Region 12, Kidapawan City Division. Andyan po sa gallery natin, we presented, it is our project, the Raspberry Pi. And then, instead of just using those materials presented by Sir, we modified the program, and then we added programs or materials from LRMDS to intertwine, to work together with that Raspberry Pi as well as the LRMDS. Actually, we installed already about 6 kits in our division. And then, this coming March, we are going to install 29 kits in the whole Region 12. Inviting everyone sa booth po ng Region 12, DepEd Kidapawan City Division. Good morning.
Yeah. That's a very good move to integrate with your LRMDS. The thing that you can also do is to put it in an e-learning portal so that teachers quickly know, how to access both, no?
Thank you very much, Dr. Miguel Rapatan. And to award the plaque of appreciation to our speaker, Dr. Miguel Rapatan, may we call on stage Director Abram Abanil.